The desert was not always silent. Once, long before the empires you know, before the names that fill your history books, there was a road. Not a road in the way we imagine it now. No cobblestones, no signposts, no fixed line drawn across the land. It was a path made of footsteps, pressed into the earth by the weight of caravans, by the shuffle of sandaled feet, and the slow groan of wooden wheels. It was a road of memory, carved into the minds of those who walked it, carried in the songs of those who survived it. They called it nothing at all. For in the year 1000 before your counting began, it was not yet a thing of maps and rulers. It was only the breath between lands, the space where one world ended and another began. And in that breath, you could find salt from the eastern seas, lapis from the mountains, silk no one had yet named, and stories that had no beginning and no end. If you follow me, I will take you to that road, not the Silk Road as you know it, but the road before the road, a place where kingdoms rose and fell in the time it takes a cloud to cross the sun, where the wind carried more than sand. It carried the scent of worlds you have never seen. So, come with me. Step beyond the gate and we will walk together into the year 1000 before Christ, when the road was young and the world was still being named. The morning arrives gently, as if the sun itself is reluctant to disturb the stillness of the border town. A pale gold light washes over the mud-brick walls, softening their rough edges and revealing the fingerprints of the men who shaped them years ago. The gates, massive and square-shouldered, still bear the dark stains of countless hands, traders, soldiers, farmers, all pressing against the wood as they have come and gone. In this early hour, they stand slightly ajar, breathing out the scents of the waking city. Warm millet porridge, wood smoke curling from hearths, and the faint sharpness of freshly cut reeds from the river bank. From the east, the road unfurls like a ribbon, its surface packed hard by centuries of footsteps. Tall bamboo poles stand in a row, their tips hung with red pennants that sway lazily in the breeze. Each flag bears the sigil of the Jew court, though here, at the empire's far edge, such symbols are more a reassurance than an authority. The horizon beyond the flags is a watercolor blur, pale mist curling over flatlands, broken only by the dark line of distant hills. The town's main square is already awake. Bronze bells jingle from the leather harnesses of mules and camels. Merchants kneel beside their goods, untying bundles of hemp cloth, stacks of lacquer bowls, baskets heavy with dried fish and fermented bean paste. The animals shift and grunt, their breath visible in the cool air. A child, barely taller than a grain sack, tugs at a camel's tail until his mother shouts, pulling him away with a laugh. It begins here, not in the heart of an empire, but at its threshold, a place where the familiar world breathes out and the unknown breathes in. The road, you see, is older than the empires that claim to guard it, older than the maps that fail to name it. It runs not as a single line, but as 1,000 choices, winding and splitting like the veins of a leaf. For some, it is the way to fortune, for others, the way home. For all, it is a path into the stories that live beyond their own. A bearded man from the west, his hair plaited and beaded, stands by a cart laden with dull gray ingots. He turns them over in his hands, letting a Zhou merchant inspect their weight. These are not silver nor gold, but tin, more precious here than either. It will be mixed with copper to make the bronze that arms soldiers and adorns the tombs of kings. The two men share no common language, but they both understand the scale's tilt, the nod, the clink of weighed coin. Nearby, a woman from the northern steppes displays her furs. Thick wolf pelts, soft hare skins, the shaggy hide of some great mountain goat. She wears a tunic stitched with bone beads, each bead a story she will never tell in this tongue. In return for her goods, she seeks salt and needles, both costly in her homeland. Between them all moves the caravan master, a man whose beard is streaked white but whose back remains straight as a spear. His voice, though quiet, cuts through the market noise. He inspects the packs tied to his camels, checks the water skins for leaks, counts the bales of cloth twice over. Each caravan is his responsibility, each life in it balanced against the dangers of the road ahead. In the shadow of the gate, two scribes sit cross-legged on reed mats, their brushes dancing over bamboo slips. They record what comes and goes: jars of sesame oil, blocks of tea, sacks of millet, rolls of hemp rope. They are not here to control the trade. No customs tax is collected in this frontier town, but to bear witness for the Zhao court. A reminder that the eyes of the capital still reach this far. A smell of roasting chestnuts drifts from a brazier, tended by an old woman whose hands are browned and lined like the earth. Travelers cluster around her, warming themselves as they bite into the steaming nuts. Coins change hands. The woman tucks them into a cloth pouch at her waist, never stopping her steady turning of the chestnuts over the heat. The narrator pauses, letting the soundscape settle. The rhythmic pounding of a blacksmith's hammer, the high chatter of swallows darting over the square, the occasional bray of a stubborn donkey. Then the voice returns. This is the road's first lesson. It is not built from stone, but from people. Without them, it is nothing more than a trail in the dust. With them, it becomes a river of stories, flowing between mountains, across deserts, through the hands of those who never see the beginning or the end. We follow a young porter named Lin, his bare feet calloused from years of walking the hard earth. He moves between stalls carrying crates of dried apricots, his shoulders bent under the weight. He dreams of joining the caravan, of seeing the mountains where the snow never melts. For now his world is the square, the smell of camels, the creak of wooden wheels. His pay will be small, a handful of grain and perhaps a copper coin, but his eyes are always on the road. Beyond the square, narrow lanes twist between low houses plastered with mud and straw. Here the town wakes more slowly. A potter kneels at his wheel, the clay spinning under his hands. The hum of a loom drifts from an open doorway. A pair of children crouch in the dust, playing at trade, swapping a pebble for a bent nail, a feather for a shell. Their laughter spills into the morning air, brighter than any bell. By mid-morning, the sun has lifted above the walls. The caravan begins to form beyond the gate. Camels kneel as their loads are secured, bolts of cloth, baskets of dried persimmons, clay jars sealed with beeswax to keep out the dust. Mules are fitted with harnesses, the bells at their throats chiming with each movement. The caravan master walks the line, murmuring instructions, adjusting knots, patting the neck of a restless animal. Travelers cluster at the edges, adjusting their clothing for the road, wide-brimmed hats for the sun, thick cloaks for the cold nights. Some carry short spears or curved knives, not for war, but for the dangers that do not announce themselves. A group of musicians, 2 flutes, a drum, and a bowed string instrument, prepare to join the caravan, hoping to earn their keep by playing at camp each night. The gate creaks fully open. Beyond lies a dirt road that stretches until it vanishes into the haze. The caravan master lifts his hand. Slowly, the first camel rises, its knees unfolding with the grace of a ship leaving harbor. One by one, they begin to move, the soft pad of their feet in the dust, the jingle of bronze bells, the murmur of voices swallowed by the open air. To leave the gate is to step into a different calendar. Days are counted not by the moon, but by the distance between wells, the taste of the wind, the weight of the load on your back. The road's time is slower, but it is relentless. It will strip away the comfort of walls and offer nothing in return but what you bring within yourself. The town recedes behind us, its walls shrinking into the horizon. Ahead, the land opens wide. A flat plain brushed with winter grass, the color of old parchment. Flocks of cranes wheel overhead, their cries fading into the wind. The road bends slightly, then disappears into the land's quiet folds, where the next chapter of the journey waits unseen. And so, the eastern gate is behind us, and the road, older than memory, lies ahead. The first day in the desert is deceptive. It greets you not with ferocity, but with a calm so wide and unbroken that you almost believe the journey will be easy. The air is cool in the early morning. The horizon glows faintly, a pale band of gold that separates the still dark earth from the still sleeping sky. The sand underfoot is firm, almost damp from the night's breath. Camels move with a slow, deliberate rhythm, their long shadows stretching ahead like dark rivers. But the desert is patient. It does not rush to show its teeth. We march in a wavering line, the caravan master at the front, his eyes narrowed to the distance. Behind him, mules plod beside the camels, carrying crates bound in rope. The sound of bells is soft here, swallowed by the immensity of the land. There are no trees, no walls, no birdsong, only the crunch of hooves, the rustle of robes, the occasional creak of leather. The narrator's voice drifts in, quiet and measured. The desert does not roar, it waits. It stretches itself wider than thought, deeper than courage. To cross it is to measure your life against something that does not care whether you live or die. By midday, the sun begins its slow, merciless ascent. Its light is no longer gold, but white, hard and sharp, like a blade laid flat across the land. Shadows shorten and vanish. The firm sand softens under our feet. Each step becomes a labor, the ground yielding only to swallow what strength we offer. The air itself seems to thicken. Breathing is work. Sweat runs down the spine and evaporates before it can soak the cloth. Tongues grow heavy. A man from the northern hills pulls his scarf over his face, leaving only his eyes exposed. A woman walking beside him adjusts the rope on her mule's harness, her lips cracked and white with salt. Even the animals slow, their pace measured to conserve the precious water inside their bodies. The desert's silence is not an absence of sound. It is a sound in itself, a kind of endless hum. The voice of heat rising from the earth, of sand grains whispering against one another. If you listen too long, it begins to seep into your thoughts. You hear things that are not there. The rush of a stream, the sigh of leaves, the far-off murmur of a city gate. But when you lift your head, there is only the shimmer of air. Somewhere behind me, a water skin sloshes, a dangerous sound because it reminds us all of how little we carry. The caravan master has rationed our supply, one swallow every hour until we reach the next well. Some newcomers chafe under the rule. They learn quickly. In the desert, thirst is not something you quench. It is something you endure. By the third day, the desert begins to reveal its true shape. Sand dunes rise in slow, rolling curves, their crests casting long, sharp shadows in the slanting light. At times, we climb them, leaning into the slope, only to descend into shallow valleys where the wind has carved strange patterns, like waves frozen in place. The dunes shift with each day, erasing the tracks behind us. Only the caravan master and the oldest guide seem to know the way. At night, the air changes again. The heat collapses all at once, leaving a cold so sudden it feels like stepping into another world. Breath rises in white clouds. The sand, still warm at the surface, cools rapidly. By midnight, it is as cold as river stone. We wrap ourselves in wool blankets and huddle close to the small fires we dare to light. Around those fires, stories take shape. A man from the far west speaks of a city swallowed whole by the dunes, its towers still standing beneath the sand. A young herder swears he saw lights moving across the horizon. Not stars, but lamps, carried by travelers who vanished long ago, still walking the road in death. Whether these tales are true matters little. In the desert, truth bends to the will of the listener. The fourth morning brings wind. It starts as a low sigh, lifting the edges of our cloaks. By midday, it grows into a restless force, carrying sand in thin veils that sting the skin and blind the eyes. We wrap our faces, lean into the gusts. The horizon disappears behind a pale curtain. The desert has turned into a skyless, borderless world. A storm here does not need lightning or rain. Its power is in the unseen, in the billions of grains that move together as one, wearing down stone, erasing the memory of where you stood only moments before. We stop to wait it out, crouching low, the animals huddled together. Sand finds its way into everything, the seams of boots, the joints of weapons, the folds of cloth. It scours the skin, grinding away sweat and dust until we are left with only the raw, clean taste of survival. When the wind finally dies, the desert looks different. The shapes of the dunes altered, the shallow valleys gone, replaced by ridges that seem unfamiliar. The caravan master adjusts our course without hesitation, but I notice the way his eyes linger on the horizon, searching. By the end of the week, our bodies have learned the rhythm of the road. We walk at dawn, rest through the burning hours, then move again in the long shadows of the afternoon. The desert teaches us to measure progress not in miles, but in wells. Each well is a victory, each mouthful of water a celebration. One such well lies in the shadow of a lone acacia tree, its roots buried deep enough to drink from the hidden water beneath. Around its base are scattered stones, the remains of offerings left by travelers before us, a strip of cloth, a polished bead, a small bronze coin. We leave our own gifts, not for the tree, but for the road itself, as if it might remember our kindness. On the 9th day, I see something that will stay with me for the rest of my life. We crest a low dune, and there, half buried in the sand, is the skeleton of a camel. Its bones bleached white by 100 suns. Beside it lies a human figure, the skull tilted back as if still searching for the sky. Around the bones, scraps of fabric flap in the wind. Fragments of a robe, dyed once in what must have been a deep red. The caravan master says nothing. He simply walks on, the bells of his camels ringing softly in the silence. By the time we reach the edge of the desert, the world feels strange. We have grown so used to the monotony, the endless gold and white, the sound of sand against skin, that the sight of distant green seems almost a dream. It shimmers at the horizon, just as the road shimmers in the heat. Some of us smile. Others weep openly, though they try to hide it. We are not yet at our journey's end, but the endless sea of sand is behind us, and we are still alive. The desert does not care who crosses it. It does not remember your name, but it will leave its mark on you, in the lines of your face, in the sound of your breath, in the way your eyes learn to read the horizon. You do not conquer it, you survive it, and that is enough. The first hint of it comes long before we see the water. It's in the air, a subtle shift, the way the wind feels softer on the skin, carrying with it the faint scent of something living. After days of breathing dust and sun, the smell of green is almost startling. We do not speak of it at first. In the desert, hope is fragile, easily broken by mirages. The land itself begins to change. The sand grows darker, flecked with bits of gravel. The dunes flatten into wide, shallow basins. Scattered tufts of grass appear, bending in the breeze. The animals sense it before we do. The camels lift their heads, nostrils flaring, their pace quickening just slightly. A mule brays, tugging at its rope, impatient to reach what it smells. And then, after a final rise in the road, it appears. The oasis lies in a shallow hollow, as if the earth itself has cupped its hands to protect this fragile gift. Tall date palms cluster around a pool of still, clear water. Their fronds sway in the breeze, casting trembling patterns of shade on the ground. The water catches the sunlight in a perfect circle of silver blue, so calm it seems unreal. Around the pool, the land bursts with life. Barley fields ripple in neat squares, their edges marked with low stone walls. Fig trees spread wide, heavy with fruit. Goats and sheep wander among them, bleating softly. Somewhere close, a bird sings, a sound so alien after the desert's silence that we pause to listen, unsure if it's real. In the desert, water is not simply water. It is the heart, the spine, the breath of the land. An oasis is not just a place to rest. It is a promise kept by the earth in defiance of the sun. The people of the oasis emerge from between the palms to greet us. They wear loose robes of undyed cotton, the cloth worn soft by years of sun and wind. Their faces are darkened by the light, but their eyes are bright, quick to measure us. There is caution in their manner. Every stranger is a question, but also a certain warmth, the warmth of those who know what it means to arrive thirsty. An elder approaches, leaning on a staff carved from acacia wood. The caravan master steps forward to meet him, bowing slightly. No words are shared at first. Instead, they clasp hands and press their foreheads together, a gesture that needs no translation. Only then do they speak, a slow exchange in a language of shared roads and long memories. We are led to the water's edge. The first drink is always careful, small sips to wake the body without shocking it. The water is cool, tasting faintly of minerals, but sweeter than any wine. Some of us kneel and splash it over our faces, letting it run into our hair. Others strip to the waist and wade into the shallows, groaning with relief as the water closes around them. The animals drink deeply, their sides heaving as they swallow mouthful after mouthful. In the shade of the palms, mats have been laid for us. We are offered bowls of goat's milk thickened with dates, flatbread still warm from the hearth, and small dishes of olives brined in clay jars. The food is simple, but here it feels like a banquet. A woman sits beside me, her hands stained green from working in the barley fields. She does not speak my tongue, but she points to the bread and then to her own chest, smiling, a way of saying, "This is ours, we share it with you." I nod and tear off a piece, handing it back to her. She laughs, shaking her head, and pushes the rest toward me. The afternoon passes in a haze of shade and quiet work. Some of us help draw water from the well at the far end of the basin, filling jars that will be buried in the cool earth for storage. Others tend to the animals, checking hooves for cracks, brushing away clumps of dried sweat and dust. The caravan master sits with the elder, speaking in low tones, mapping out the next stretch of the road. I see them tracing the air with their fingers, mountains, valleys, the places where water might be found. Children dart between us, chasing each other through the palm trunks. One boy carries a wooden hoop, rolling it along the ground with a stick. Another trails a string behind him, dragging a small bundle of feathers, a pretend bird, perhaps. Their laughter rises into the warm air, mingling with the hum of insects in the grass. When the sun begins to sink, the people of the oasis prepare a meal in our honor. A whole lamb is roasted over a pit of coals, its skin crisp and glistening. Barley is cooked with onions and herbs, the steam carrying a scent that makes our stomachs ache with hunger. Jugs of water are passed freely now, mixed with a sweet liquor made from fermented dates. We sit together in a wide circle, locals and travelers alike. The elder speaks, and though I cannot understand the words, the tone is that of welcome and warning, a reminder that the road ahead will not always offer such gifts. The caravan master replies in kind, his voice low but steady. After the meal, the music begins. Two men take up long-necked lutes, plucking strings that hum like wind over sand. A woman beats a small hand drum, her rhythm steady as a heartbeat. Voices rise in a song I do not know, but somehow recognize. A melody shaped by the road, carrying both joy and longing. Some sway where they sit, others close their eyes and let the sound carry them. The narrator's voice weaves between the music. Here in the hollow of the earth, the road pauses. The desert still waits beyond the palms, the mountains beyond that. But for one night, the journey is suspended. We are not travelers here, nor strangers. We are simply human, thirsty, hungry, warmed by fire and song. When the fire burns low, I wander to the water's edge. The moon hangs full above the palms, its reflection a pale coin floating in the pool. Frogs croak from the reeds. Somewhere in the darkness a night bird calls. The air is cool and damp, scented with the sweetness of figs and the faint tang of wet stone. I kneel and trail my fingers in the water. The surface ripples breaking the moon's face into 100 silver shards. I think of the desert behind us, of the wells we measured our days by, of the bones we passed in the sand. And I think of the road ahead, the snow peaks that rise like teeth against the sky, the cities whose names I do not yet know. Before dawn, we are woken by the soft sound of footsteps. The women of the oasis move among us, placing small bundles at our sides, dried dates, flatbread, small clay flasks of water, gifts for the road. The elder comes last, walking slowly with his staff. He touches each of us on the shoulder, murmuring a blessing that I cannot understand, but feel all the same. We load the animals in the cool half-light. The camels grumble, shifting under the weight of the fresh water jars. The mules stamp the ground, their breath clouding in the air. As we leave, the people of the oasis gather at the edge of the palms. They raise their hands in farewell, not waving, but holding them still, a gesture that feels less like goodbye and more like the passing of something sacred. We step out into the open plain. The green falls away behind us. The sun rises. And once more, the road unfolds. The desert had been left far behind, but its dust still clung to my cloak, woven into the very fabric like a memory. Ahead, the land began to rise in great folds, each ridge steeper and colder than the last. In the low light of dawn, the snow-capped peaks appeared not like simple mountains, but like the bones of the earth, thrust through the skin of the world. For days we had climbed through dry foothills where the wind smelled of pine and wet stone. Streams spilled down from unseen heights, carrying meltwater that shone silver in the sunlight. The air had grown thin, sharp in the lungs, forcing us to move more slowly. The caravan's pace changed. Fewer words, longer rests, and a quiet vigilance that made even the loudest merchants tread carefully. It was here that the Silk Road, though not yet known by that name, began to test its travelers most ruthlessly. These mountain passes were ancient, older than the desert tracks, older than the cities in the plains. Local herders spoke of traders crossing here since the age of their grandfathers' grandfathers, carrying not just goods, but stories, songs, and omens. They called the highest pass the Gate of the Sky, a name that both promised and warned. We set out from the last stone-built village at the mountain's base just after sunrise. Its houses were low, walls thick against the cold, with flat roofs where firewood was stacked like small fortresses. Villagers came out to watch us leave, offering small nods, but few words. In the highlands, speech was reserved, as though sound itself should be saved for moments that mattered. 2 mountain guides joined us there, brothers, wrapped in wool and yak hide, their cheeks weathered dark by decades in the wind. They spoke little, communicating mostly through gestures, but their eyes were always scanning the slope, reading the snow and rock like a script the rest of us could not decipher. The trail wound upward through a forest of juniper and fir. The trees whispered with the wind, releasing sharp scents that cut through the cold air. Frost rimed the edges of my gloves. Somewhere high above, a crow called, 3 sharp cries, then silence. Every few hours, we passed small cairns of stone, markers left by generations of travelers. Each one was different. Some had scraps of cloth tied to the top, fluttering like faded prayers. Others bore small offerings of grain, coins, or carved wood. I asked one of the guides about them. He said they were for the mountain spirits, to ask for safe passage, and to honor those who had not returned. By the 3rd day of climbing, the ground was dusted with snow. The air burned in the chest, and the wind grew relentless, slipping through the thickest cloaks. Our steps became a rhythm of effort. Lift, plant, breathe. My legs ached as though each muscle were forged from lead. We saw less wildlife here. A lone snow hare darted between rocks. High above, a mountain goat watched us with calm detachment, its breath steaming in the thin air. One of the merchants murmured that it was a good omen. The goat walks only where the path is true. At night, we camped in sheltered hollows where the wind could not find us. Fires were small and guarded, fed by dried juniper branches brought up from lower ground. The stars were so sharp they seemed to pierce the black sky. I would wake in the middle of the night to find the mountains bathed in silver light from the moon, their peaks glowing like ancient temples. Around those fires, the guides spoke of the pass. Long ago, they said, a king from the east tried to take his army over these mountains to conquer the lands beyond. The spirits of the pass froze the rivers, sent storms without warning, and scattered his men into the snow. Only a handful returned, their hair turned white from fear. Since then, travelers came only in small groups, offering respect instead of challenge. Another tale told of a wandering monk who had crossed the pass carrying nothing but a wooden staff and a pouch of herbs. He was said to have reached the far valleys safely, but upon returning years later, he vanished in the snow, leaving only the staff standing upright, half buried in the drift. These stories sank into me like the cold. They made each step feel heavier, as though the mountain itself were measuring us. On the 5th morning, we reached the snow line. The forest fell away, replaced by rock and ice. The wind became a living thing, howling between ridges, snatching the breath from our mouths. We tied scarves tightly across our faces and pressed on, following the guides in single file. Here the trail narrowed, clinging to the mountainside. On one side, a wall of stone and ice. On the other, a sheer drop into clouded nothingness. The snow crunched underfoot, sometimes giving way to the treacherous slick of ice. The guides tested each step with their staffs before letting us pass. At one point, the path crossed a frozen stream. The ice beneath our boots groaned like a deep drum. We moved one by one, eyes fixed ahead, until all were safely across. No one spoke for an hour after that. Late that day, we reached the pass itself, a wind-swept saddle between 2 jagged peaks. The wind here was like no other, a constant roar that seemed to come from the sky itself. The clouds raced so low overhead I felt I could touch them. There was a cairn here, too, larger than the rest, built of dark stone. Strips of cloth in many colors fluttered from its peak, snapping in the wind. Our guides knelt before it, pressing their foreheads to the snow. One by one, others in the caravan did the same. I followed, the cold seeping into my knees, feeling the strange pull of this place, half a road, half a shrine. From the summit, the world fell away in every direction, white ridges rolling into blue distance, valleys hidden under veils of cloud. Somewhere down there lay the western lands, new markets, new dangers, new stories. But for that moment, All I could feel was the thin air in my lungs and the pounding of my own heart, loud against the silence of the snow. Morning came gently to the valley, not with the sudden glare of the desert sun or the sharp white blaze of the mountain snows, but with a slow unrolling of light, like silk being drawn from a chest. The mists hung low between the slopes, curled around boulders, and drifted lazily above the river that wound its way along the valley floor. The caravan's footsteps, so accustomed to the crunch of sand or the hollow thud of snow, now found soft, damp earth. It was a change the men felt in their bones. Birdsong greeted them here, a sound that felt almost alien after weeks of wind and silence. Bright flashes of wings darted between the reeds by the water's edge. Somewhere, a hidden waterfall laughed over stones, the sound mingling with the distant toll of a herdsman's bell. The animals, too, sensed the change. Camels sniffed the air, hooves sinking slightly into the mossy ground, and the horses flicked their tails at invisible insects. The valley was long and gentle, flanked by cliffs the color of weathered jade. Over centuries, the river had carved smooth channels in the stone, leaving caves and hollows that locals claimed were once home to wandering hermits. The air was warmer here than in the pass they had just crossed, but it carried a crispness that kept the skin cool. It smelled of wet leaves and distant rain. For the weary traders, it felt like stepping into another world entirely, a place that could coax the tension out of their shoulders and replace it with something almost like peace. Nestled into the bends of the river were small clusters of dwellings, walls of stacked stone and roofs of layered bark and grass. Smoke rose in gentle threads from holes in the rooftops. Women in long, belted tunics tended small gardens, their hands deep in the soil, turning it as though they were kneading bread. Old men sat outside, weaving baskets from river reeds, their gnarled fingers moving with the memory of decades. Children splashed barefoot at the shallows, chasing each other with bright, laughing cries. The caravan's arrival was met with cautious eyes, but not hostility. Here, strangers were not rare. This was a resting point for those who traveled between mountains and deserts. The headman of the first village emerged, leaning on a staff carved with the shapes of fish and leaves. His beard was streaked with silver, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. He greeted the caravan in a tongue that carried the melody of running water, soft, deliberate, and full of pauses. Through a series of gestures, and with the help of a young boy who spoke a few words of the trader's language, he offered them a place to rest near the riverbank. Tents were pitched beneath trees heavy with ripe fruit, while the caravan's cooks unpacked bundles of grain and dried meat. Local women brought bowls of fresh goat's milk and flat, herb-scented bread. The bread was still warm, and when broken open released a fragrant steam. For men who had eaten little more than hard biscuits for weeks, this was a feast. Trading here was quiet and measured, lacking the noise of desert markets or the haggling of large towns. Goods were laid out on woven mats, rolls of dyed cloth, bundles of medicinal herbs tied with red string, polished river stones used as charms, jars of honey thick as amber. The locals valued salt, an item the caravan had in abundance, and also coveted the fine copper tools the traders carried. In return, they offered cured hides, dried berries, and small carved idols of animal spirits said to bring safe passage. One particularly skilled artisan showed his work. Knives with blades of black volcanic glass, so sharp they could split a hair. he traded them for a length of indigo cloth from the eastern lands. The exchange was made with solemn nods, no words, just the understanding that both had given something of value. Tents were pitched beneath trees heavy with ripe fruit, while the caravan's cooks unpacked bundles of grain and dried meat. Local women brought bowls of fresh goat's milk and flat herb-scented bread. The bread was still warm, and when broken open, released a fragrant steam. For men who had eaten little more than hard biscuits for weeks, this was a feast. That evening, after the animals had been watered and the last embers of cooking fires faded to a glow, the caravan gathered at the base of a towering cliff. A local elder stood before them, holding a small oil lamp whose light danced across the stone. Slowly, deliberately, he began to speak, not in the trader's language, but in his own, his voice carrying in the stillness. Through the boy interpreter, they learned it was a story of the valley's beginning. Long ago, before the river had carved its path, this place was said to be a dry basin, haunted by winds that sang like wolves. One day, a giant, his heart heavy with sorrow, walked into the basin and lay down. His tears flowed so greatly that they became the river, bringing life to the valley. The stones, shaped by his body, still marked the land. The cliffs were his sides, the boulders his bones. The elder's eyes shone as he told it, and in the flickering lamplight, the cliffs behind him seemed to lean in, listening. After the tale, there was silence, broken only by the soft rush of the river. The traders felt something stir in them, not belief perhaps, but a quiet recognition that this place held its own truth, as real in the hearts of its people as the stars above were to navigators. Days passed slowly here. The caravan stayed longer than they had planned, drawn by the valley's gentleness. The river washed the dust from their clothes and the ache from their legs. The locals showed them where to find wild herbs that eased stomach troubles, how to set traps in the shallows for fish that hid among the reeds, and which stones could spark a fire even when wet. There was a rhythm to the valley life that was unlike the restless pulse of the road. The traders began to wake with the sound of water and sleep with the whisper of leaves. They began to speak more softly, to walk more slowly. Even the camels, usually restless, seemed to settle, chewing contentedly under the shade of willows. But the road still called. Every day the sun rose a little earlier over the ridges, as if reminding them that seasons shifted and journeys waited. The headman, seeing the caravan make ready to leave, gave them a parting gift, a small jar of river stones, polished smooth by years of flow. "For the road," he said, through the boy interpreter, "so you'll always carry the valley with you." On the morning of departure, mist again covered the river. The villagers gathered quietly to watch the caravan go. Children waved. The headman raised his staff in farewell. As the traders wound their way along the valley path, the air began to change again. Less damp, more dry, carrying the scent of open plains ahead. Behind them, the green of the valley slowly faded, replaced by the muted tones of rock and earth. Yet the sound of the river stayed with them, as steady in their minds as their own heartbeat. They had crossed deserts and snow, but it was here, in the valley of green and stone, that they learned the value of slowing down, of letting the journey be as much about the moments of rest as the miles traveled. And so they carried the memory with them, as one carries water in a clay jar, carefully, reverently, knowing it could refresh them long after they had left its source. The caravan crested the final rise of a wind-smoothed hill just as the first light of dawn spilled across the valley. What lay below was unlike anything they had seen in weeks of barren travel, a land painted in the colors of wealth and legend. The sun's early rays struck a series of rooftops tiled with burnished metal, turning the clustered city into a shimmering mirage. From this distance, it seemed as though a river of molten gold had flowed down from the mountains and frozen into streets and walls. They had reached the kingdom of copper and gold, a name whispered among traders like a spell to conjure riches. It was a place where fortunes could be made overnight, or lost even faster, depending on the whims of the king and the flow of the mines. Stories told around campfires described halls filled with hammered copper plates, gold-inlaid doors, and merchants so wealthy they used silver only for weighing grain. From their vantage point, the city seemed protected by the very earth itself. To the north and east rose red cliffs, striated with bands of green and black ore, their slopes dotted with scaffolds and ladders leading to mine entrances, yawning like the mouths of giants. Smoke drifted upward from charcoal pits where ore was roasted, carrying with it a faint metallic tang that even the morning wind could not dispel. To the south, the city walls stood high and proud, each gate flanked by braziers that would be lit by night to announce the kingdom's presence to travelers. As the caravan began its descent into the valley, the path narrowed into a gorge carved by centuries of runoff from melting snow above. The walls of the gorge were etched with petroglyphs, spirals, beasts, and crude figures of miners carrying baskets on their backs. Some were so worn they seemed to be fading back into the stone. The guide, a man from the western steppes with a beard plaited in copper wire, explained that the markings were left by the ancestors of the kingdom's people, long before they had learned to smelt metal. They say the first gold was found here by the mountain spirits, he said, patting the rock as one might a familiar animal. And the first copper was taken, not from the ground, but from the sky, a gift from a falling star. By midday, they reached the outer trade camp. Even before entering the city, the wealth of the kingdom revealed itself. Traders from distant lands displayed goods on carpets woven with fine gold thread, the designs glinting in the sun. Cages of exotic birds with feathers the color of molten copper lined the street. A potter demonstrated his craft with clay shot through with mica, so that even a humble bowl shimmered faintly when it caught the light. There was a constant ringing of hammers on anvils, not in some distant smithy, but here among the market stalls, where artisans reshaped gold and copper into hairpins, clasps, and coins, in full view of bargaining customers. And yet, beneath the glitter, there was a scent of iron and smoke, the reminder that all this beauty was built upon the sweat of miners and the furnaces that consumed entire forests to feed their hunger. The caravan leader, mindful of the city's laws, halted at the southern gate to pay the entry tax. A line of travelers waited, each presenting a small token of metal, a copper ingot, a gold coin, or in the case of the poorer pilgrims, even a nugget of ore. The gatekeeper, a broad-shouldered woman with arms ringed in hammered copper bands, examined each offering and weighed it on a scale of polished bronze. Only when the payment met the measure did she strike the gong that allowed the gates to open. Inside the city was a tapestry of noise and color. Streets wound like veins of ore through clusters of tall, narrow houses, their upper floors supported by timber beams carved with curling cloud motifs. Copper water spouts shaped like dragons jutted from rooftops, dripping melted snow into cisterns below. The people themselves seemed to reflect the wealth around them. Many wore belts of beaten copper plates, earrings of gold shaped like sunbursts, or even thin circlets resting on their brows. But not everyone gleamed. In the shadowed alleys between main streets, the poorer workers moved with bowed shoulders, their hands stained green from the ore dust, their eyes flicking warily toward the palace hill where the king's banners snapped in the wind. Wealth here was a mountain. Some stood upon it, basking in the light, while others labored endlessly at its base. The caravan was led to the central square, where a monumental statue dominated the space. It depicted a miner offering up a lump of ore to a towering sun, its rays crafted entirely from gold leaf. Around the base, merchants had set up stalls selling tools, chisels of bronze, baskets woven from reed and leather, lamps for the dark mine tunnels. The guide explained that each miner, upon entering the mines, offered a short prayer here for safety and fortune. In the late afternoon, the leader of the caravan was summoned to the palace. The king wished to see the goods they carried. They ascended the palace hill along a road paved with flat copper plates polished so smooth they reflected the clouds above. The palace itself was a wonder, walls studded with discs of gold that caught the setting sun, great doors of cedar bound in copper, and balconies from which musicians played flutes and drums to announce the hour. Inside, the throne room was lit by braziers filled with chunks of mineral that burned with a greenish flame, filling the air with a metallic scent. The king, dressed in a robe of deep red silk embroidered with gold thread, sat beneath a canopy of hammered copper that curved overhead like the inside of a great bell. His face was lined but keen-eyed, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone accustomed to obedience. He inquired after the caravan's journey, the hazards they faced, the goods they brought, the places they had seen. In return, he offered not coin, but ore sacks of raw copper and gold nuggets still rough from the earth. In this kingdom, the metals themselves were currency, their value so ingrained in daily life that they were weighed, not counted. That evening, the caravan members were invited to a feast. The tables were low and covered in plates of spiced lamb, figs soaked in honey, and bread stamped with patterns resembling the sun and moon. Wine was poured into goblets of gold, heavy and warm to the touch. Yet, even amid the celebration, there was an undercurrent, the knowledge that the mines never slept. As they dined, men and women in ore-stained tunics were still deep underground, chipping at the earth by lamplight. Children carried baskets of rock to be sorted, and fires in the smelting yards glowed against the night sky. Before dawn, the travelers awoke to the sound of the miners' procession, a steady drumbeat as they marched toward the gorge, each carrying a small lamp. The caravan scribe watched in silence, realizing that this wealth came at a cost measured not just in labor, but in years of human life spent in darkness. When they left the city 2 days later, the air still carried the scent of smoke and metal. Behind them, the walls and rooftops glimmered in the morning sun, a beacon of promise to the next caravan that would come seeking fortune in the kingdom of copper and gold. But the travelers knew something now, that the kingdom was not merely a place of riches. It was a forge, and everyone who entered, king, miner, or merchant, was tempered by its fires. The sun rises over the wasteland without mercy. Its light is not the warm gold of a gentle dawn, but the pale, pitiless white of a burning blade cutting across the horizon. The desert before us seems endless, a rolling ocean of sand and stone shimmering under the growing heat, and every grain appears to hum with the memory of those who came before and those who never returned. It is here, the caravan leader tells us, that the wind speaks in strange voices. Some say it is the cry of the desert itself, shaped by shifting dunes. Others, especially the older traders with faces like sun-cracked leather, insist that the voices are the restless souls of travelers, lost to thirst, heat, or worse. We set out at first light, the shadows still long and cool, though the ground is already warm beneath our sandals. The camels move with slow, deliberate steps. Around us, the desert has no landmarks, only the rhythm of dune after dune, each crest revealing yet another curve of golden emptiness.
The first hours are filled with silence, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, absolute kind, where even the sound of your own breath feels intrusive. In that stillness, the mind becomes aware of every small detail. The faint jingle of a camel's harness, the shifting weight of a water skin. You begin to notice the dry taste in your mouth far earlier than you'd like. The wind, when it comes, is hot and carries with it fine dust that slips under your veil and coats your tongue. It is then that you start to understand why this desert has the name it does. If you listen too closely, you could swear those murmurs are forming words. One of the guards, a tall man from the Western Kingdoms, tells me that once in this very desert, his uncle swore he heard his own name called from behind him, though no one was there. He followed the sound, the man says in a low voice, and we never saw him again. He smiles when he says it, but it is not the smile of someone telling a joke. By midday, the heat has become an oppressive weight. We stop briefly in the shadow of a jagged outcrop, the only break in the horizon we've seen all day. Here the stones are streaked with strange, pale lines, veins of salt from an ancient sea, long since dried up. Somewhere deep below our feet, perhaps, there are still traces of that forgotten water, but no one here is foolish enough to go digging. From the shade, I see something glinting far off in the sand. At first, I think it is a piece of metal, but when we approach, it becomes clear. A rib bone, bleached white by centuries of sun. We find more bones as we walk, some of camel, some of horse, and some not so easy to identify. The desert does not bury its dead with dignity. It strips them bare, scatters them, and leaves them to be reshaped by the wind into ghostly arrangements. Each time a gust passes, I imagine it is lifting the last words from their lips and carrying them into the endless air. We march until the light begins to bleed from the sky, and the desert undergoes its most startling transformation. The heat vanishes with shocking speed, replaced by a biting cold that makes the stars above feel even sharper. The sky is vast, so vast it feels as if it is pressing down on you. And in it hangs the moon, swollen, pale, and ancient. Around our small camp, the dunes cast long shadows that seem to move even when the wind is still. The air is quiet, but not silent. There is a soft hiss, a whispering, like sand sliding across stone, and once in a while, a low sigh, too deep and too close to be mere wind. We sit close to the fire, each person reluctant to stray far into the darkness. The stories begin then, passed from one to another. A Persian merchant speaks of a caravan swallowed whole by a sandstorm. Their wagons found years later, perfectly preserved under the dunes. A woman from the east tells of a wandering ascetic who claimed the desert revealed the future to those willing to walk it alone at night, though those who tried were never seen again. As the fire burns low, I find myself staring into the dunes, half expecting to see shapes moving against the starlight. But there is nothing. And yet I feel certain that something is there, just beyond the reach of the flame. At dawn, we follow a trail so faint it could almost be a trick of the light, a line of stones half buried in sand stretching toward the west. The caravan leader says this was once a marked route for traders in the time of his grandfather's grandfather. Now the stones are all but forgotten, and only those who know how to read the desert can still find them. The path takes us past a dry riverbed, its cracked clay surface littered with fragments of pottery, proof that once, perhaps hundreds of years ago, there was a settlement here. No trace of its walls remains, but I can picture it in my mind. Tents and huts clustered by the water, the air filled with the smell of cooking fires, the sound of laughter, and the chatter of traders exchanging goods. Now only the whispering wind remains. As we walk, I realize the strange thing about this desert. It is not truly empty. It is full of memories, of echoes, of lives lived and lost. The bones are not just warnings, but reminders that the road we walk today is older than any of us, and it will outlast us all. When we finally leave the dunes behind, stepping onto firmer ground toward the next leg of the journey, I cannot help but look back. In the shifting light, the dunes seem to move, almost as if they are following us. And for just a moment, I think I hear my name carried on the wind. Night falls long before you see the city. The last light of the day is swallowed by the horizon, leaving the caravan in a twilight that feels endless. Your feet ache from the day's march, the leather straps of your sandals biting at your skin, and every breath is thick with the mingled scents of camel sweat, dried dates, and the faint metallic tang of the desert air. And then, there it is, a glow. Not one light, but 1,000, like a string of stars, has fallen to earth, their fire trapped inside colored glass and polished bronze. The caravan murmurs in awe, travelers pointing, children clinging to their mothers. Some of the older merchants nod knowingly, as if greeting an old friend across the dark. You have reached it. The city of 1,000 lanterns, the beating heart of this trade route's midpoint, a place where east meets west and every path seems to converge. The road narrows between tall mud brick walls, each plastered smooth and painted with faded scenes, chariots pulled by strange high-necked horses, rivers winding past mountains, merchants offering goods to kings. The great gate itself is carved from cedar, darkened by centuries, its surface incised with curling motifs that catch the firelight. 2 guards in scale armor stand on either side, their faces shadowed beneath tall, crested helmets. The clink of their bronze-tipped spears is a sound older than memory. They do not ask for names, only tribute. The caravan master steps forward, offering a pouch heavy with silver scales and dyed cloth. It is accepted without a word, and with a slow groan of hinges, the gate swings open. Warm light spills out, carrying with it the scent of roasted meat and the faint perfume of spices, saffron, cinnamon, and something sharp and sweet you can't name. You step inside, and the world changes. Every street is lit. Lanterns hang from carved poles, from iron hooks jutting out of walls, from streams stretched between balconies. They are of every shape, some square and austere, others round and delicate, painted with birds, mountains, or curling clouds. The glass is tinted green, blue, amber, and deep red, so the streets glow as if lit by molten jewels. The flicker of flame makes shadows dance across the cobblestones, turning even ordinary walls into shifting tapestries. The people are no less varied.
Here walks a man in a tall felt hat, his beard braided with copper wire. There, a woman in a veil of shimmering silk, bangles chiming softly at her wrists. Children dart between stalls, carrying skewers of honey-glazed nuts. A troupe of musicians sits cross-legged in a circle, playing reed flutes and frame drums, their melody weaving through the air like smoke. Somewhere above it all, you hear the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, ringing like a bell in the night.
The central square is a world in itself. Tents and stalls form a maze of colors dyed cloth in brilliant crimsons and indigos, heaps of lapis lazuli, baskets overflowing with figs, pomegranates, and dates. Merchants shout their wares in languages you recognize and others you do not, their words overlapping into a constant musical confusion. From the east, a man offers tea leaves wrapped in pressed bricks. From the west, another displays ingots of copper stamped with the royal seal. A woman from the far south sells incense that smolders in small clay bowls, the smoke curling into thin blue threads that sting your eyes but fill your head with strange, calming dreams. Coins pass from hand to hand, but so too do stories. Traders swap news of distant lands, a war brewing near a northern river, a city swallowed by the shifting sands, a new route found through a mountain pass. You catch pieces of these tales like wind-blown scraps, but enough to feel the threads of the world pulling together here.
Your caravan master leads you to a caravanserai, a great rectangular building with a wide central courtyard. The walls are thick. The upper rooms reach by stairways that cling to the sides like vines. Lanterns hang from every arch, their light turning the plaster walls a warm gold. The smell of stewing lamb drifts from a side room, mixed with the sharp scent of fermented mare's milk. Inside, you find a place on a woven mat, and your bones sink into the relief of stillness. Other travelers sit nearby, their faces weary but open. A man from the mountain strums a three-stringed lute, the notes slow and mournful. A woman with sun-cracked lips tells of a river so wide it takes half a day to cross, and so deep it swallows ships whole. Above you, the open courtyard frames the night sky, the same stars you saw in the desert, but now their light is softened by the 1,000 lanterns that surround you.
The next day, you wander. The city is divided into quarters, each alive with its own craft. In one street, potters sit at low wheels, their hands slick with clay as they shape vessels into elegant curves. In another, bronze workers hammer sheets of metal into breastplates, kettles, and intricate mirrors whose surfaces gleam like still water. You pause at a dye maker's shop, where vats of boiling liquid bubble in hues so rich they seem unreal, deep indigo, brilliant saffron, a red as dark as dried blood. Cloth is pulled from these vats with long wooden rods steaming in the morning air, before being hung from ropes to dry in the sun. The smell is strong, acrid and earthy, but it clings to you like a memory. In the weaving quarter, women sit at looms strung with fine threads, their fingers moving so quickly you cannot follow the pattern until the image appears, a falcon mid-flight, a mountain peak, a curling river. These are more than goods. They are fragments of the lands that birthed them. As evening falls again, you follow a crowd toward a hill at the city's heart. At its peak stands the Temple of Light, its white stone walls catching the last rays of the sun. As night deepens, the temple steps are lined with hundreds of lanterns, each lit by hand. The flames seem to climb the hill like a river of fire until they meet the great bronze brazier at the summit. Priests in robes of pale linen chant softly, their voices weaving together in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. Offerings of grain, fruit, and fragrant oil are laid before the flame, each given with a whispered wish or prayer. No matter the tongue, the tone is the same: reverent, hopeful, human. It is said the temple's flame has burned for 300 years without dying. Whether truth or legend, you feel its heat on your face and, for a moment, believe it. Your stay coincides with the festival that gives the city its name. On the final night, every household hangs lanterns outside their doors. Not just one, but dozens. They float on the river that runs through the city, each carried downstream like a drifting star. Children laugh and run ahead of them, their reflections flickering on the water. Musicians fill the air with drums and flutes, while dancers move in slow circles, their silk sleeves catching the lantern light. Strangers greet one another as if they were kin. Merchants who haggled fiercely by day now share cups of sweet, spiced wine. For a single night, the city feels like a single home, and when you leave, the memory of it clings to you. The desert will come again, the wind and the sand and the endless thirst. But you will remember that here, once, the night was bright enough to banish shadows.
The first hint of the western winds was not seen, but felt. Long before the horizon changed, before the earth shifted into strange, unfamiliar shapes, the air itself grew restless. It moved in slow, sweeping currents, carrying scents that did not belong to the lands we had crossed, a dryness tinged with salt and something sharper, like the scent of sun-baked stone. These winds were not gentle companions. They pressed against the skin in heavy, deliberate breaths, as though they came from a place that had no concern for man, beast, or burden. And yet, in their ceaseless rhythm, there was an odd kind of guidance, a steady hand pushing us westward, whispering of distances yet to come. Our caravan had grown leaner by now. Some had turned back at the last great market city, others had been claimed by the desert, illness, or simple fatigue. The faces that remained were hardened by months on the road. Their laughter was rarer, their words slower, yet their eyes held a sharpened resolve. Each of us knew that to travel this far was to cross into the realm of endurance, a place where will mattered more than the strength of one's legs. The western winds made the nights colder. The stars, once a blanket of familiar constellations, began to shift. Some familiar patterns clung stubbornly to the horizon, but others disappeared entirely, swallowed by the vastness of a sky we did not know. The moon rose like a pale coin, sharp-edged and cold, and in its light the desert sands gleamed like powdered silver. During the day, the winds carried with them voices, not human, but the constant hiss and moan of air dragging itself over stone ridges and dry plains. Sometimes the sound would swell without warning, filling the air with a roar that drowned out conversation and made the camels shift uneasily. Other times it softened to a whisper, as though it had exhausted itself. It was the old merchant, Harun, who first told us the winds were not merely weather, but a sign. "In the lands beyond," he said, wrapping his wool cloak tighter around his shoulders, "the wind is a king. It shapes the roads, decides the fates of men, and carries the whispers of far-off markets. To hear it is to be told what awaits, if one knows how to listen." I asked him what the wind was telling us now. He smiled, showing teeth worn like river stones. "It says, be patient. It says, you are not the first to walk this path, and you will not be the last." By the 5th day beneath the western winds, the landscape began to change. The flat, endless stretches of sand were broken by jagged outcrops of rock, ancient weathered teeth rising from the ground.
In their shadows, small, hardy plants clung to life, their leaves brittle yet persistent. The ground grew firmer underfoot, the dunes giving way to packed earth laced with pale stones that crunched beneath our sandals. At night, we gathered close to the fires, the wind pulling at the flames and sending sparks drifting into the dark. Our food was simpler now: dried dates, strips of salted meat, and flatbread that tasted of dust and smoke. The cooks moved quickly, knowing that if the wind grew too strong, it could smother the coals and leave us with nothing warm to eat. The sound of the wind became part of our dreams. Some nights it lulled us into a deep, heavy sleep, like the rocking of a boat. Other nights it carried strange cries, the high or the rhythmic clatter of something unseen. I woke with the uneasy feeling that someone had been calling my name. We passed a series of stone pillars carved with spiraling patterns, relics from some forgotten tribe. Haroun said they were markers placed long ago to guide travelers, though the people who had set them here were gone. The winds had worn the carvings smooth in places, as though trying to erase the memory of those who had dared to challenge them. On the 12th day, we reached a high plateau. From its edge, the land opened before us in a vast, rolling plain, shimmering in the late afternoon light. Far to the west, I could see the faint smudge of mountains, our next barrier still weeks away. Between us and them stretched grasslands, swaying under the push of the wind, their ripples moving like the surface of a restless sea. Here the wind smelled different, less of salt, more of green things. It carried the faint sweetness of flowering grasses, mingled with the musky scent of unseen herds. We soon discovered their source. Wild antelope, pale and swift, moving in loose herds across the horizon. They seemed to appear and vanish with the rise and fall of the land, their slender legs barely touching the ground as they ran. We made camp in the shelter of a low ridge. The wind rattled through the tall grass around us, creating a sound like 1,000 soft hands brushing together. That night, as I lay wrapped in my blanket, I thought of the countless other travelers who must have stood in this same place. Traders, nomads, wanderers, all guided by the same unyielding wind. Haroun's words returned to me. You are not the first, you will not be the last. The next morning we rose before dawn. The wind was fierce, biting at our faces as we loaded the camels. In the east, the sky bled into shades of rose and gold, and in that light, the grasslands seemed to glow. The wind pressed against our backs, urging us forward, and I could not help but feel that it was impatient, as though it knew something we did not, something waiting just beyond the horizon. Days blended into one another. The grasslands gave way to patches of rocky soil where only low shrubs grew. The air dried again, and the wind became sharper, almost metallic in taste. Each evening as we stopped to rest, the sun would sink into a haze of gold dust, painting the world in shades of copper and fire. One night, a storm rose without warning. The wind howled with such force that the tents strained against their ropes, and we were forced to take them down before they were torn to shreds. We huddled together in the open, cloaks pulled tight, as the air turned thick with flying sand and grit. The storm lasted until dawn, and when it passed, the land around us had changed.
Small dunes, it appeared, where the ground had been flat. Haroun found our way again by reading the stars. I watched him trace lines across the sky with a gnarled finger, murmuring to himself in a language I did not know. The wind had quieted, but its presence was still felt, like the low hum of a distant drum.
When we finally descended into a wide valley dotted with shallow lakes, it felt like stepping into another world. The air was cooler and the water reflected the sky like polished metal. Here the wind softened, moving gently through the reeds. Nomadic herders greeted us cautiously, their faces wrapped in cloth against the elements. They offered us bowls of fermented mare's milk, sour, thick, and strangely refreshing after weeks of dryness. We stayed 2 nights in that valley. On the morning of the 3rd day, as we prepared to leave, the chief of the herders, a man with deep-set eyes and a voice like gravel, took my hand. "The wind will take you far," he said, "but remember, it can carry you away as easily as it carries you forward."
I thought of those words often as we resumed our journey. The western winds did not relent. They pushed us onward, always onward, until the plains began to slope upward once more, toward the dark line of mountains that marked the edge of this land. Standing there, with the wind in my face and the world stretched out behind me, I understood what Haroun had meant. The winds were not only weather, nor merely a challenge to endure. They were a thread, one of many, that tied together all who had ever walked this path. And as I stepped forward into their embrace, I knew that, like the countless travelers before me, I had become part of that thread. The road did not end with a gate, nor a sign, nor any clear boundary to say, "Here is the limit of what you know." It simply changed. For months you have followed the Silk Road's ghostly ancestor, a shifting ribbon of dust and gravel, carved by the footsteps of traders, hunters, and dreamers, long before there was even a name for it. You have crossed deserts that spoke in whispers, mountains that gleamed like frozen fortresses, and rivers that carried rumors faster than horses could run. But here, at last, the land feels different in a way no map could explain. The wind is heavier. The air tastes of salt, though no ocean is yet in sight. The earth underfoot has a color you have never seen before, neither the ochre of the desert nor the green of valleys, but a pale gray, almost silver, as if the stones themselves have been bleached by centuries of strange suns. It is the westernmost reach of the world, as your people understand it, a place spoken of in fireside tales as the rim, where the earth falls away into great waters and the stars shine differently at night. The elders say it is where caravans go to trade for things no one has words for, and where some travelers decide never to return.
The journey to this place is not made alone. Your caravan, once a lively procession of merchants and herders, has been reduced by time and distance. The weeks of travel have stripped it down to its barest, strongest members, men and women whose faces are carved by wind and sun, whose patience is as long as the road itself. The pack animals are leaner now, but still proud. Their bells chime in the dry wind, a sound that has accompanied you since the first day you left the eastern gate. At the final inland rest stop, the caravan gathers around a well so old its stones have been worn smooth by the hands of 1,000 years. Traders here speak languages you do not recognize. The cadence of their speech rises and falls like waves. The goods they display are strange to the eye. Lacquered shells from unseen shores, oils that smell of flowers you have never smelled, and metalwork so delicate it seems impossible that human hands made it.
you notice something else. The way they look at the road you have just traveled. To them, the east is the strange land. You are the exotic one now. And in their eyes, there is both curiosity and caution.
It is on the fourth morning after leaving the last well that you first hear it. A distant roar, faint and rhythmic, like the breathing of some vast creature. The path ahead dips between low dunes, and the wind carries a strange scent, brine mixed with something metallic. When the dunes part, the sight takes your breath. The sea. Not a lake, not a river, but an endless expanse of moving silver blue, its surface flashing in the sunlight like hammered bronze. Waves roll toward the shore in slow, unending lines, each crowned with white foam. Seabirds wheel and cry in the high air, their voices sharp and alien after months of desert quiet. You have reached a place that feels like the edge of the earth. If you walk far enough into that water, you imagine you might fall into the sky. The harbor is unlike any market or city you have seen. There are no towering walls or great gates. The sea itself is the wall, and the ships are its gates. Vessels with hulls painted in bright colors bob on the water, their sails striped and stitched with symbols from distant lands. The docks are alive, with motion ropes creaking, sailors shouting in tongues you cannot place. The goods here are stranger still. Spices so strong they make your eyes water. Musical instruments shaped in ways that defy the traditions of the East. Curved harps of bone and horn. Drums stretched with the hides of animals you have never seen. There are people here whose faces are not like yours, nor like the steppe people, nor the desert folk. Their hair is the color of sun-bleached straw, their skin pale and freckled, their clothes woven in patterns of blue and red, unlike any dye work you have known. Some greet you with open palms. Others look at you as though trying to imagine the road you have walked. On your first night at the edge, the port comes alive with a celebration. No one explains its purpose. Perhaps it is for trade, perhaps for the turning of a season, or perhaps because life here at the rim of the known demands moments of joy in the face of its own transience. Fires are lit along the shore, their light flickering against the dark water. Musicians play instruments whose voices are at once sharp and mournful. Dancers move in circles, their shadows long and thin against the sand. You sit apart for a while, watching the glow of firelight on the waves, listening to the crash and retreat of the sea. Here, for the first time in many months, the horizon does not promise another road. It promises only the unknown, the kind of unknown that swallows caravans whole and replaces their names with legend. When the sun rises, the ships are preparing to leave. Some point their bows back along the coast, toward lands you have heard of only in rumor. Others point westward, toward waters with no name in your tongue. The caravan leader, who has guided you since the far side of the mountains, asks a simple question. Do you ride back, or do you sail forward? You look at the sea. You think of the deserts you have crossed, the oases you have rested in, the markets and kingdoms and ghost-haunted dunes. You think of the road behind you as a great tapestry, and of the road ahead as a blank space waiting for its threads. The answer will not be in words. It will be in the direction your feet choose when you rise. Whether you return or go on, one truth remains. The road's gift is not the silk or gold or stories you carry home. It is the way the world feels bigger now. So vast that no map could hope to contain it. It is the way your heart has learned to walk in rhythm with wind and earth. It is the way your eyes now look at the horizon, not as an end, but as an invitation. At the edge of the known world, you understand. There is no true edge, only the next horizon. And so the road vanishes into the horizon. The sands shift again, covering the traces of our passing. The wind erases our footprints as it has erased the footprints of 1,000 caravans before us. The markets have fallen silent. The lanterns have gone dark. The copper and gold have tarnished, and the banners that once caught the sun now sleep in the dust. But the road is still there, not in the earth, but in the stories. Somewhere, beneath centuries of empire and ruin, beneath the noise of wars and the forgetting of names, it waits. It waits in the curve of a pot left in the ruins of a market stall, in the faint trace of dye on a scrap of cloth, in the way a mountain stream still carries the taste of faraway salt.
We think of history as something finished, a closed book on a forgotten shelf. But history is not finished. It is a road still being walked, even when we cannot see it. One day you will leave this place and the images will fade, but perhaps when you hear the wind over dry stone or smell spice in the air far from home, you will remember this road and the people who walked it long before your world began. And maybe, just for a moment, you will feel the truth that you are not at the end of the story. You are standing in its middle, and the road goes on.